Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel Asterisk in the cinematic opening of the video. We're pulled into the tense world of the Cold War with striking visuals, nuclear drills, mushroom clouds, barbed wire around the Berlin Wall, and shadowy spy figures. The narration immediately challenges the audience's assumptions when people think of the Cold War. They picture the global standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. But the voiceover presents a startling proposition. Canada, too, played a crucial role behind the scenes, a role history has largely ignored. This sets the stage for the central question the video will explore. Why has Canada's Cold War legacy been left in the shadows? As the Cold War escalated after 1945, geography made Canada indispensable, stretching across the Arctic and positioned directly between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Canada became a frontline observer and potential battleground in the event of a nuclear strike. One of the clearest signs of this was Canada's partnership with the United States in the formation of NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command. NORAD oversaw radar detection and coordinated air defense across the continent. A key part of this effort was the Distant Early Warning Line, a massive radar network built across the Arctic to detect Soviet bombers or missiles. While it offered protection, it also caused environmental disruption and impacted indigenous communities who saw their lands transformed by military infrastructure. Canada's Cold War significance wasn't limited to geography, became a hotbed of espionage. In 1945, just as World War II ended, Igor Gouzenko, Soviet cipher clerk stationed at the Soviet embassy in Ottawa, defected to Canadian authorities. He brought with him documents proving the existence of a Soviet spy ring operating in North America. These revelations stunned the public and political leaders alike. Some historians argue that Gouzenko's defection effectively launched the Cold War, as it exposed the level of Soviet infiltration and prompted a new era of intelligence operations. In the aftermath, Canada was thrust into the world of counterintelligence and surveillance, often coordinating closely with Britain and the United States, as tensions rose between superpowers. The Cold War became increasingly militarized. Canadian air bases like Goose Bay and Comox were used by American strategic bombers preparing for potential conflict. During this period, Canada allowed the storage of U.S. nuclear weapons on its soil through controversial and secretive arrangements. This led to political friction at home. The cancellation of the Avro Arrow, Canada's advanced fighter jet project, and the decision to rely on American defense systems ignited national debate. Many Canadians were uneasy about being so closely tied to American military plans, especially ones involving nuclear weapons. Anti-nuclear movements gained momentum, fueled by fears of global annihilation and loss of Canadian sovereignty. Despite these tensions, Canada also carved out a reputation as a voice of peace and diplomacy. In 1949, Canada became a founding member of NATO, cementing its role in collective Western defense. But it didn't stop there. Under Lester B. Pearson, Canada pioneered modern peacekeeping during the Suez Crisis, a contribution that earned Pearson the Nobel Peace Prize. Throughout the Cold War, Canada promoted nuclear disarmament and acted as a middle power, often trying to mediate between more aggressive superpower postures. It played a quiet but consistent role in soft power diplomacy that contrasted sharply with the more confrontational tactics of its allies. At home, the Cold War shaped Canadian society in ways that were both visible and hidden. The government encouraged civil defense measures, families built fallout shelters. Schools held air raid drills, and pamphlets explained how to survive a nuclear attack. But behind the scenes, paranoia took root. The RCMP began surveilling citizens suspected of communist leanings, including artists, academics, and union leaders. The Red Scare wasn't limited to the U.S. Canada, too, experienced a climate of suspicion and fear that permeated politics and daily life. The Cold War quietly reshaped the country's identity, turning its attention outward and inward at the same time. Asterisk as the Cold War drew to a close in 1991. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, much of the world's attention focused on the superpowers. United States and the USSR, who had dominated the era through nuclear brinkmanship, ideological confrontation, and proxy wars. In this grand narrative, Canada's role often went unnoticed. Not because it was insignificant, but because it was less dramatic. Canada's contributions were foundational, operating behind the scenes in ways that supported global stability, helped prevent escalation, and quietly influenced the geopolitical landscape. Unlike the United States, which engaged in direct military interventions, or the Soviet Union, which backed revolutions and satellite regimes, Canada didn't seek confrontation. Instead, it played a strategic and stabilizing role. One of the most critical aspects of this was Canada's geography. Situated directly above the United States and stretching across the Arctic, Canada formed a vast and vulnerable frontier between the Western world and the Soviet Union. This location made it a key player in early warning and defense systems. One of Canada's most important ATHS military contributions was its participation in the creation and maintenance of the distant early CH. And we all know I've been exploring that. Which is key player in ILD. A key player in early warning and defense case. One of Canada's no whys. When we see with Kaliwas, with Kali D, with Subcordi, Committee, I can lead a Kaliwad with its FIC case. If you see with FHEC, Contid wife, KYY, UI to see K walkin so I can get to Y to quiet, Kai so to see we to can to so you could guide to kata kuta kai can sit to I queft to kit with it. I could kick this. Warning dew line. A system of radar stations built across the Arctic in the 1950s. This line served as a first alert system designed to detect incoming Soviet bombers or missiles coming over the North Pole. The infrastructure was massive and costly, and its maintenance was often harsh and dangerous due to the extreme northern environment. This system integrated into NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command, played a crucial role in the defense of North America. While these radar systems never had to warn of an actual attack, their presence deterred Soviet aggression by demonstrating North America's readiness. In addition to defense infrastructure, Canada made critical contributions in the realm of intelligence and counter-espionage. The Gouzenko affair in 1945, which involved Soviet cipher clerk Igor Gouzenko defecting and exposing a Soviet spy network operating in North America, is considered by many historians as one of the events that triggered the Cold War. The documents he provided revealed a level of Soviet infiltration that alarmed Western governments and shifted Canadian intelligence from a wartime to a peacetime but highly alert footing. After this, Canada became a trusted and active member of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, working closely with the US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand to monitor Soviet activities globally. Another pillar of Canada's Cold War involvement was peacekeeping and diplomacy. Under leaders like Lester B. Pearson, Canada became a global advocate for peaceful conflict resolution. During the Suez Crisis in 1956, Pearson proposed the world's first large-scale United Nations peacekeeping mission, a bold and innovative solution that not only de-escalated a potential superpower confrontation, but also earned him the Nobel Peace Prize. Canada's consistent participation in peacekeeping missions throughout the Cold War, including in places like Cyprus, the Congo, and the Middle East, reinforced its image as a middle power, a nation that could mediate, de-escalate, and provide moral leadership in a world increasingly polarized by ideology. Canada also wrestled with difficult decisions about nuclear weapons. Although it allowed us nuclear weapons on its soil through arrangements like the placement of Bomark missiles and the use of air bases for American bombers. This was met with considerable political and public resistance. The 1963 debate over accepting nuclear warheads led to the fall of Prime Minister John Diefenbacher's government and created lasting divisions in Canadian politics. This internal conflict reflected a broader struggle: how to be a loyal ally to the U.S. while maintaining an independent voice on the world stage. The eventual decision to withdraw nuclear weapons from Canadian soil in the 1980s symbolized this careful balancing act between alliance and autonomy. Domestically, the Cold War reshaped Canadian society. The federal government initiated civil defense programs, encouraged the construction of fallout shelters, and distributed survival pamphlets. At the same time, RCMP surveillance of leftist groups and suspected communists created a culture of SANECAD, LDC culture, of cases. And we all know I've been exploring that path. Encourage the construction of fallout. Encouraged the construction of fallout conflicts. At Ricardi Cicadades, at with save, at where Calat stay port at one wake, at we save, at where stay t dallas 610 sav. Can quid say cade sav k to 10 to come to a sakade say to cade k side gay kaquita kikai can call I can sick can I to go to suck and to kata to we you can you to can sek kasiki to kakada you can kakai kakatika I with can we with a get I can't to get I got a call to kika what you get to but you suspicion and fear. These measures mirrored what was happening in the U.S. with McCarthyism, though on a smaller scale. Still, they left a legacy of mistrust, particularly among labor organizers, artists, and immigrants from Eastern Europe. As the Cold War ended, Canada was not remembered as a battlefield participant, but rather as a sentinel, a mediator and mediator, and a steady hand in a volatile era. NORAD remains active, underscoring the enduring relevance of the early alliances and infrastructure Canada helped build. And with Arctic sovereignty now becoming a contentious issue, especially as melting ice opens new shipping lanes and global powers like Russia and China express interest, the strategic importance of Canada's northern defenses and diplomacy has resurfaced. In essence, Canada's Cold War legacy is one of quiet strength. It did not seek power through dominance or aggression, but rather through cooperation, surveillance, preparedness, and diplomacy. It helped hold the fragile balance of the Cold War, not by being loud, but by being consistent, committed, and reliable. That legacy, though often overshadowed, is still shaping Canada's role in the 21st century world order. In closing, the voiceover invites viewers to reflect. Canada may not have fired a shot, but it stood watch in silence. The video ends by asking a simple but provocative question. Had you ever heard this part of the Cold War story before? Viewers are encouraged to comment on what surprised them most, share their thoughts, and explore more untold Canadian stories in related videos such as The Secret History of NORAD and Why Canada Helped Invent Peacekeeping. Likes, shares, and subscriptions are welcome to keep history's hidden chapters in the public eye.